Welcome to Case by Case. We want to just take a moment and remind you that this content is intended for adult audiences. It is created for educational and informational purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised, as discussions may include references to real criminal cases, violence, and other sensitive and potentially distressing topics. While we strive to present every case with accuracy and respect those involved, the material may not be suitable for all viewers. Please proceed thoughtfully. And remember, if you need to take a step back, if you find something that concerns you, if you find it to be triggering and you need to take a step back, please do. You can join us whenever you're ready to come back. We'll leave the light on. Welcome to Case by Case. Today we are doing Day 6 recap of the trial of Georgia versus Colin Gray. Colin Gray is the father of the school shooter Colt Gray. Colt Gray's trial has not been scheduled yet. Colin Gray, the father, who also goes by Colin Gray, that's his nickname. Colin Gray, it is alleged that he bought his son a shotgun for his birthday or for Christmas right before this happened. And this happened in September, but he bought it the Christmas before. That he took no steps at all to safeguard that gun, and that he knew that his son was having a lot of problems. Now, today, it was the main witness was Colt Gray's mother, Colin's wife. They're still married. It's come throughout the trial that her life was quite a mess as well. And they provided no stability to their kids. And their kids bounced back and forth. These things that came up in testimony, the kids bounced back and forth. And as a result, there were a lot of emotional issues with Colt. Colt, it came out through the mother that Colt expressed that he had researched and believed he had acute mania, and that he was hearing voices. And she described a number of things that were violent. She described how he would stab things around the house with a knife, including tearing up the furniture, tearing up the leather in her car. He smashed a number of flat screen TVs. He often, it seemed to me like he pitted one parent against another to get what he wanted. And at some point, because they did not have insurance, she put him on her Zoloft. Now, she describes it as a very low dosage, and that she knew all about it. And she knew from talking to her doctor that, the genealogy would have been the same, the physiology. So she just gave him a very low dosage by breaking off a quarter or a half. She said a half, but then she said a quarter of her pills, her Zoloft pills. There was a lot of testimony about her run-ins with the law, how she keyed. She backed up that she did key her husband's work truck, and he did get fired. Colt had a very antagonistic and violent relationship with her. And there were just some interesting things that came out during her testimony. Some things I'm not quite sure we understood the proper way, the way it was asked. But she described about the police being called out when he was acting up, and the police saying, if you want to punish him right here in front of us, you can do it. We're not, he's not going to harm you. But she described that he was already bigger than her, and there was no way for her to have done that, and that wasn't something she would have done. Now, she did say that at one point she had defects called on her because she hit him. She slapped him, I think she said. It sounded to me like a lot of turmoil. That's the best word I can use. A lot of turmoil, a lot of back and forth. They weren't doing well down here, so the kids moved up with the dad. The dad wasn't giving the attention. The kids wanted to move back to the mom. The mom would get busted for meth and alcohol, and then the kids got taken and moved back to their dads. It was a recipe for a disaster. And I'm surprised we haven't heard of anything serious acting out of the other two. One was much younger, but I think the sister was just a couple years younger. So it was really, one thing that did come up that I wanted to bring up that was really interesting. I just couldn't get over this. He actually had conversations I told you about last time with the grandmother about school shooters, specifically Nicholas Cruz. Well, he did that with the mother independently as well. In fact, he spoke about Nicholas Cruz and wanting to reach out and get in touch with him and putting money on Nicholas Cruz's commissary. She said she didn't report it to anybody. She didn't think twice because she thought he was lying. She thought, well, he didn't have a way to get money to put it on there, so there's no way that he's putting money on there. It's just something he's making up. But I think that is a bit of an alarm, to have your child tell you that they're wanting to communicate with the school shooter, trying to communicate with the school shooter, and trying to understand how the person did it, why they did it, and kind of get in their mind. Just looking back, you can see where there were just so many warning signs, from the lack of action taken by his communications about school shooters. There were a lot of things that she looked up on the internet that seemed to indicate that she was concerned about charges for parents. Now, the kids weren't living with her, so you can only infer, because they certainly didn't, she gave one answer, but the implication was that she was looking up these things because she was concerned about what might happen to herself and the dad, Colin Gray, because she was looking up the Ethan Crumbley case. Now, her justification on the stand was that she was looking it up because she had watched the documentary and wanted to know what had ever happened. Another thing that came up is that when Colt texted someone or emailed someone or wrote somewhere that he wanted to kill his dad, she didn't alert her husband to this. Now, again, they're still married. They've been separated for a long time. They've gone back and forth. But she didn't notify him of this, and I thought that was interesting. But we also have to remember, we don't know how much of the time during all of these decisions she was high or drunk, because she did have an issue, she said herself, with meth And she said a variety of other things. She didn't name what they were. So I kept thinking through the whole thing, this poor kid never had a chance. Now, I say that, but he really was manipulative. But kids learn that. If you stop that behavior from the time they're young, most of the time you can get it. But I will say we've got a family member who's extremely manipulative. And there's been many, many, many efforts to stop it. But this person has been manipulative since they were a child. Very young child. So I don't know if Colt had that ability in him from day one and he just learned how to really work it. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so I'm just thinking out loud about this. Those of you that are listening, if you've got, any type of psychology training, you can certainly, let me know in the Facebook group. But the bottom line is, I kept thinking over and over during this testimony today, and then thinking back to the grandmother's testimony. There were so many warning signs. He spoke about school shooters to grandma. He spoke about school shooters to his mom. He told his dad that his interest was in shooting and only shooting. He had writings that, were suspicious. He was angry. He was volatile. He was violent. He used knives around the place constantly. She called it lashing out. That he would lash out and he would get a knife and just start cutting things up, or he would go through the house and just break things. I can't even imagine my parents tolerating that for a minute. Even if I had been diagnosed with something, I can't imagine my father ever tolerating that. Not for a minute. And my step-siblings, a couple of them did act out. And it wasn't tolerated. So I don't know if this was tolerated because there just wasn't a solid relationship foundation with this kid. Mom was in and out of his life, and there were many times she talked about he would block her on phones, so she couldn't even get in touch with him. But then there would be times her husband would block her, and she would be just able to talk to the kids. So she just knew that the kids were okay, but she did talk about how upsetting it was to her that she couldn't have a normal relationship with her kids. She seemed to be pretty forthright on the stand. She didn't break down. She wasn't emotional. She didn't even shed a tear at all. But I think the prosecutor did a pretty good job, and I think the defense attorney went kind of light on her, honestly. Now, granted, she's not on trial here. She's just a witness. And she was called in by the state. But my thinking was, had, the defense attorney gone a little harder on her, I don't know, maybe the prosecutor would have just stopped it because she wasn't on trial. But it just seems like to defend her husband, the defense attorney, I thought was going to point more of it to, you didn't alert them to this, and you didn't alert them to that. Now, he did do some of that. He did point out, you didn't tell him about that, and you didn't tell him about that. You didn't tell him that Colt threatened to kill him. I think I just felt like it was going to be a I thought she was going to be ripped apart, really. I really did. So that was the big thing. And then the last witness was a counselor who basically talked about the process of when the kids come into school and the information that they're given, and that, she talked about Colt coming to her office and staying for like 6 hours one day. He would often go to the counselor's office when he was having extreme anxiety. So, Colt was reaching out. I mean, he was going to counselors at school. He was trying to talk to his grandmother, trying to talk to his mom. We don't know about what he said to his dad, but yet maybe the dad will testify on his own behalf. But it just really seemed like this kid was really trying to get attention in any way he could, and he could not get that attention. And whether that attention was so that he could get some help with his mental illness, or if it was that he was just trying to get attention. As I said, we have a family member who is all about the attention. And even during intense therapy, we were told, this is about attention. And that in and of itself is a problem. So it's hard to know without, understanding every bit of the dynamics. And of course, we're not getting everything. We're getting what the family's telling us. But there are things that we won't know. So that's what's going on. I think they did make a little step forward in the case against the dad. And the reason I say that is because she did testify that the gun was unsecured in the room and in Colt's room, and that it was a concern of hers, and that they had numerous arguments about it, her and her husband, and that she kept telling him, you need to take that gun and put it up. You need to take that gun and put it up. Put it in your truck. Put it somewhere. But he's having issues. So she did testify that she was concerned. Now, she felt like she was more concerned he might harm himself. But that's why she wanted in her mind, that's why she wanted the gun put up. She said it never crossed her mind that he might hurt someone else. But if you see a child lashing out and cutting up furniture, cutting up, smashing things in the house and breaking TVs and breaking the furniture around the house, that's a violent tendency to me. Now, they didn't take it to the extreme of apparently hurting other people at that point, but that's anger lashing out. So the thought to give this child a gun at any point in time in his life, to me, is a big, big red flag. I can't understand how anybody could give a child a gun, especially under those circumstances. And you don't lock it down. Those things are just critical to me. I'm all about protecting, our rights, our First Amendment, our Second Amendment, everything. But he wasn't even of age. And the parents should be monitoring it and managing it and securing it. And they weren't. The dad wasn't. And the mom was up there off and on. But if the child was not in her possession, how could she really do anything? Anyway, that's the recap for today. I thought it was going to actually be longer and it would be later for me to do. But, in a nutshell, it just boils down to the things that she experienced. It was a long day of testimony for her. But it was, I think it's one more step towards his conviction. So this is Case by Case. I appreciate you listening to me tonight. And I'll be back tomorrow with the next day's recap.